Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to a new season. We're continuing to roll on in our new 4th season of I Am Dad Podcast. I'm so excited, so proud of where we've come in the last 3 years of doing this and entering into our 4-year stretch. The guests just keep being more and more brilliant, more and more exciting, more and more authentic. And I just love what God is doing with the voices that he's putting in our space. Well, we want to welcome you to this exciting and impactful episode of I Am Dad Podcast because we have the honor of having Dr. Anashay Wright. She's a dynamic mother, wife, educator, speaker, and founder of Authentic Disruption and Disruptive Partners. For over 2 decades, Anashay has been a force for good disruption, partnering with leaders, policymakers, and communities to dismantle systematic inequities and empower people to create real change. From her pioneering leadership development programs to her groundbreaking work disrupting the school to prison pipeline in her hometown of Dekalb County, Anashay's passion for uplifting others is matched only by her commitment to authentically, I said that word all wrong, y'all, authentically. I probably said it wrong again, but you know what? There's just those words like that you just can't get right. And connection. Her accolades include national recognition from NPR, Good Day Atlanta, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, among many others. Today, we're going to explore Anashay's inspiring journey, her groundbreaking work in education and equity, and her mission to help others harness their power to influence change. Let's welcome her to the stage today. How you doing, friend?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I probably read that word 1,000 times. I know how to say authentically. I just can't get it out this morning.
That's all right. We know what you're talking about.
She
Authenticity.
authentic, y'all. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way.
Keep it 100. There
Go
we go.
100. She authentic. Listen, I've known this young lady's work. I've watched her. As some of my friends tell me, I low level stalk you. I don't comment on your posts. And I don't say I don't do all that stuff, but I'm following what you're doing, the great work that you're doing. And by just chance, had the opportunity to be able to share the same floor with her at a conference recently, and was able to sit back and just watch her brilliance in the work that she did. And I said, you got to come on I Am Dad Podcast. We got to talk about it. And then just in our conversation, found out, why our spirits connected. And so I was sharing with her before we came on, that as I was looking through her website and stuff, I didn't see doctor in front of her name. And I wanted to ensure that if it was there, that I put it there to respect that nature. And when she said she didn't, it confirmed for me that God, when man doesn't recognize you in a way that man should recognize you, that God never forgets you, and he makes sure that your aura is in front of your resume, that when you touch that resume and see that name, that which I have made and constructed my child to be is that what she is. And so I congratulate you and thank you for being with us this morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm equally a fan of your work too. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me. I think I learned about you. I serve as a board member for National Parent Union. And I want to say Jason told me about your
Yeah.
works like a while back, so
Mhm.
I've been secretly stalking you too. So it's an honor to be here.
Jason's the man. I love when people are connectors. Jason is a connector. He's a connector a facilitator. He is a great facilitator and connector of people with like spirits. So we start off our podcast in a very interesting way, only because of the context of our conversation is always around men and fatherhood, and might not necessarily be what the subject matter is, but it is the core emphasis of our program. So I'm always interested in hearing one's daddy story. Tell me your daddy story.
Yeah, you know what? You did that. My dad is Martin J. Murphy. We just actually had a great weekend. He came down here and we had a little vacation I didn't know I needed. But he and my mother were married, and they had me, and I am the only child to Martin J. Murphy and the late Brenda Wyatt. So my dad is my buddy. He's my friend. He's been my biggest supporter as I went through a lot of major transitions, I would say, over these last couple of years. But yeah, my daddy's story, humble beginnings. They divorced when I was 2 or 3. There was a period when he was not there. But we're good now. My children are very close with him as well. So
Mm.
it's been
Yeah,
good.
we often also, it's interesting to me because folks, when they see the work that I do, they're always curious as to how I got here and how I got into this work. And they believe that somehow I went through some academic pathway to do what I do. And I
Mhm.
did. It just wasn't an institutional pathway. It was a life pathway
Got
that led me to where I am. Talk a little bit about that journey to which you are now. How'd you get there?
Man, to where I am now. How did I get here? A lot of love, a lot of light, a lot of leadership. I was forced to lead at a very young age. My mother, I'm the eldest of 3. I'm the eldest of 3. My baby brother, he's 39. He'll be 40 this month. He suffered from a stroke this past year. So that's been rough. I became his caregiver. My mother passed away at 39. So he had a stroke at 39. My mom passed away at 39. Um, I grew up having to lead. I think at 7 months I
Mhm.
could walk. So imagine this little like Chucky looking doll, walking around. Couldn't crawl, mind you, right? But I was walking and running before I could crawl. And that is the story of disruption. I always tell that story because that's me. I've always disrupted, defied the odds, right? Like, you're supposed
Mhm.
to crawl before you walk. Not this kid. I walk and ran, but couldn't get back up.
Mhm.
And it speaks to disruptors and warriors and healers and builders in community where we're off running out so much sometimes we forget that we need somebody to help us get back up and to heal and connect sometimes. So
Mhm.
that has been symbolic of me. I grew up in, I think if I was born in Indiana, 5, I left, came to Decatur where it's always greater, baby. Uh, Chandler Road, I tell people, I say by day I'm Dr. Wright, by night I'm Shay Shay. So
Mm.
you can get these hands or these
Right.
strategic plans. That's what I tell them. You want these hands or these strategic plans? What kind of hands? Oh, holy hands.
Right, 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 right. Right.
But yeah, I grew up in Decatur. I'm unapologetically committed to the power, to the promise of our Black community. I think Black children are absolutely joyful, peaceful, powerful. And I just, full circle, I became an educator. Well, I first started out co-founder of the Lisa Left Eye Lopez Foundation.
Mhm.
That's Left Eye from TLC.
Mhm.
Then got into education, and just all the way up. Advising superintendents. I've seen it all.
Mhm. But the work is so critical. And so, this conversation around education, we had an off conversation about AI, which we're going to get to in a minute.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of stay in this space around particularly Black families and education, because there's a lot of stuff in there. But when you created authentic disruption, I'm going to assume that the way you wanted to disrupt wasn't in a way that creates chaos, because disruption can be that, right? Disruption can be done in a way that it creates chaos. But when you are an intentional disruptor, meaning
Sure.
that you are very focused on disrupting something,
Mhm.
that can be very impactful and meaningful to the population that you're working with. What exactly are you intentionally looking at to disrupt?
I really appreciate that question. And for me, this is the K-5 educator coming out for me. So when you think about disrupting or disrupt or disruption, I want you to think of one word or the synonym, which is to interrupt. To
Mhm.
disrupt is simply to interrupt the state of.
Mhm.
Um, And to keep that simple, my question: are disruptive partners started out as a joke, but not really. It was around this idea of what if we could partner to disrupt or interrupt the status quo or the state of foolishness in
Mm-hmm.
public education, and
Mm-hmm.
what would that look like? And it's probably the most inclusive thing I've ever done, right? Because true disruption, disruptive innovation, disruption in the business sense is out of Harvard, and a lot of people don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tesla is a disruptor.
Mm-hmm.
Tesla, they defied, how we fuel cars, right, or how we power cars. Uber is known as a disruptor, right?
Mm-hmm.
They disrupted the cab industry, and so everybody in business knows that it's either disrupt or be disrupted,
Right.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's failed because they've always done it that way. They
Mm-hmm.
interrupt, So the only sector that hadn't done it, right, were two main sectors were healthcare and education.
Mm-hmm.
And so I brought this concept, that is out of the Clayton Christensen institution. Shout out to Tom, my friends at the Clayton Christensen Institution, where that's what they do. They study disruptive innovation in K-12 education. So it's only seen negative to people with an impoverished mindset, because people who come from power and positionality understand that if you ain't disrupting, then you're doing more of the same.
Right. When you look at education, Dr. Payne and I was having this conversation some weeks ago, and we were talking about the impact of systems, right?
Mhm.
And so there is one thing to be a disruptor and another thing to be impacted at the same time by disruption, right?
Mhm.
And so when we talk about intentionality, we got to take an eye and look towards systems that were intentionally designed to destruct the nature of who we are as Black people. Like
Mhm.
when you look at that stuff, how difficult is that fight for you? You're trying to disrupt the norm, but at the same time, you have to be conscious that part of the behavior that we are trying to change is as a result of something that was intentionally built to disrupt that.
So you nailed it. You used the word consciousness. The main thing that I work with adults to disrupt, kids are so much easier. Yeah, it's so much easier when it comes to this, is to disrupt their thinking.
Mm,
We can't do anything until you disrupt the stories you've been sold and told about whatever it is. Um, that is what's hardest. It's hardest with adults who lead with the deficit of our children, right? That's the disruption. The disruption is in the thinking, because as the mind goes and as beliefs go, so does the doing.
mhm,
So that is very hard to disrupt old ways of thinking, because you interrupt old, outdated, harmful ways of thinking with something new, visionary, and aspirational. And I'll
mhm,
give you an example. Imagine a world where 75% or more of every child graduates from 12th grade prepared to make 75,000 or more with or without a degree.
mhm.
If we pause right there, that's going to blow half of the room's mind, because they can't envision a world where that can happen. And then we back into the promise. So you have to fast forward to the future to disrupt the present, and especially when it comes to our children, our men, our communities. That is the disruption. When I walk in a room as a Black woman who, like, I grew up flipping food stamps, right? But I also can design and write policy. That's the disruption.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like
mhm,
and so you have to ask people, what's the story you're telling yourself about me? Because
mhm,
that's not the story I'm telling myself about me.
mhm. When a couple years ago, 2022, I was honored by Oprah on the OWN network in a series that she did called Heroes, Father Heroes. I can't remember what the exact name of it. Anyway, she was honoring people who were doing work around working with Black fathers. And so um, after the thing aired,
Mhm.
um, I came home one day and my wife said, "You have a package in the mail from Oprah." And so I kind of jokingly said, "Well, I know it ain't a car because you can't put that in the mail because that's what I
Right.
was hoping she would, say, you get a car, you get a car, you get a
Right,
car."
right, 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 right. That's her thing. I'm like, what was it?
Right. Now, she did hook a brother up. She sent my family and my wife and my two boys to Hawaii for 7 days. So she hooked us up.
Her Oprah is the truth.
Yeah, she is the stone truth. So she hands me this package, and I was like, she goes, open it up, see what it is. I'm like, all right. So I open it up, and it's a book. And she had just written this book. And I'm going here based on something that you just said, because I want to get your thought on this. And she said, and the book was called What Happened to You? And in the book, she wrote a note to me and said, when I interviewed you, I thought about you and I thought about this book. And she says, I wrote on a note that you must send this book to Kenneth, because I believe that this is an important part of his work that he needs to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And the understanding was that when we are working with our people, that it's not enough to just ask them what's wrong with you, that you have to ask them what happened to you.
Yeah.
Right. But when you ask that question, what happened, when you were just talking about thinking is where we have been disruptive. We have a progressional change model at Fathers Incorporated with our dads that says this, Dr. Wright, that if I can change the way you feel, I can change the way you think. If I can change the way you think, I can change what you do. The problem with that, or challenge with that when it comes to our people, is that we focus way too much in what people do without trying to understand how they think. And then we don't ask enough questions about how they think to determine how they feel. And when you were talking about thinking, my mind was in, yeah, but a lot of how they're thinking is determined by how they feel, right? Because if you get up in the morning and you got a headache, it changes how you think about the day.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
You could be walking in the middle of the night to the bathroom, all things are right, and you stub your toe on the thing. That pain then affects how you feel.
Yep.
And so for our community, we don't do enough in putting weight on how we feel from day to day. How does that show up in your work?
Well, it's the crux of it. It's like, in order to think about how you feel, you'd actually have to create space to feel,
Mm,
right? And it's so weird. For me in education, teaching is one of the most human experiences, right? It requires like relational capital, right? It requires those things. And so as an educator, any program I'm designing or I'm building, I'm always building a space to simply connect and be human. What that looks like is, it could look like at an alternative school, it looked like, 75% of these kids were African American males. 100% had IEPs or students with disabilities. But every Friday, we set aside 15 minutes to have a freestyle cipher just to connect.
mm,
And the goal, they were always trying to, Monday through Thursday, they were trying to learn their vocabulary words for whatever we were reading, because I was saying great lyricists are great readers and writers and thinkers.
mm-hmm,
And they had to battle me on Fridays.
mm-hmm.
Nobody won. Because I would annihilate them on the mic. Like, I'm cold blooded on the mic, right? But it's like, it was just, and then, and we just talk, and it organically would come to these three things. I would end the conversation and asking them, how are you feeling today? Are you joyful? Are you peaceful? Are you powerful?
Mm,
Those three things. And if they weren't, we were saying, okay, well, what's the sadness? What are you angry about? Or what's the fear?
mm-hmm.
Because if we can get underneath the negative feelings, right, that we need, right, then we can get back to joy, peace, and power. What do you need to be joyful, peaceful, and powerful?
Right.
And power could be economic power, it could be cultural power, right? The power to write a letter to my teacher who work on my nerves, like, it was all about empowering kids to be leaders of themselves. But you have to create space to simply connect and be human.
Right.
Because the brain is the amygdala. Like, it's when a kid comes in, if their brain is hijacked, it takes 90 minutes for cortisol to go down.
Mm,
So how are we not worried about kids' feelings and emotions when the brain is where all of this happens? The heart and the brain is the soul.
right.
Right? So if you make a kid feel intellectually safe, if you make their heart feel safe, learning, in 30 days, I had kids in an alternative school increasing and reading 2 grade levels ahead.
Mm,
because their heart was safe, their brain felt safe, right? Because we only think about physical safety. We don't think about creating space for the soul to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like I was, you were talking about going to school. Like, I'm an alternative route teacher. Like, my undergrad had nothing to do with teaching. Hallelujah. Because I was
Mm-hmm.
not indoctrinated into stupid when it came to kids, right? I was just like a free spirit. I was like, what's up? We teaching? Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. And then I got my master's in curriculum and instruction, but even then I was an alternative route teacher. So I never did things. I was always a disruptor in such a positive way. But rule number one was create space to be human, because this is not my classroom, it's theirs.
Right.
It's the kids' room. Like, I tell adults, how dare you tell a kid to sit down in my classroom? Baby, it's not yours. Without them per pupil dollars and spending, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
It's their community.
Right.
Right. So we have to shift. Like, kids feel powerless. They parents telling them what to do, teachers telling them what to do, everybody telling them what to do. You're not creating space for them to feel joyful, peaceful, which is often silence,
Mm.
and powerful. People want to know, how do I reach the kids? Just be quiet. When a kid tells you something, right when you want to talk, don't.
Mm.
It works in marriage. It works in all kind of places in life. But we're talking about the kids today.
Yeah, I often wonder. So as we think about the challenges that our community has and the solutions that we're trying to come up with in the infrastructure that exists for us right now, or at least is available to us,
Mhm.
like, whose responsibility is it to slow things down so that they can understand, particularly parents, what you just said, right? Because we parent in the way that we were parented. There's no other manual. There's
Nope.
no other manual that tells us how to parent our children other than the one that was developed for us by the way we were parented. And the goal, if we're going to go back generations, which we can't disconnect our past from our present, right? So whenever I look at my children, the answer to why my children is the way they are
Mhm.
is because their parents were the way they were. The
Mhm.
answer to why am I the way I am
Mhm.
is because my parents were the way they were. The answer to why my parents were the way they were is because their parents were the way they were. Right.
Mhm.
And so if you keep going back, which
Mhm.
is now we're going back into the whole, evilness of slavery and the destruction of family and how it broke us apart. So we can't connect our lineage. We can't connect back to be able to tell those stories.
Mhm.
But when you look at responsibility of whose responsibility is it to disrupt the disruption of understanding how we got to where we are, is it our responsibility or is it a shared responsibility? And then whatever that responsibility is, what does it look like um in making that plain for people to understand?
When you say, is it our responsibility, tell me more. Who is the
Our
our?
responsibility as those of us who've taken on the charge to disrupt,
Mm.
right? We have become, in essence, the disciples of our children's future.
Mhm.
We are the representatives of, and we have taken on the mantle and charge of doing what we can possibly do today for our children's children. We are our children's disciples, right? And so, as such, whose responsibility is it for our children in this space when we know that our families, those people that we're trying to
Mhm.
impact, don't necessarily have either all the tools or they don't have all the information to do it in a healthy way, because the only tools they have and the only information that they have is the tools and information that they were handed to by their own parents.
Yeah, it's the responsibility of those that are in power.
Mm,
That's who it is, right? Anybody that has power and positionality. I'm also a certified power and influence coach, and I
okay.
got that certification to really create spaces. When I do my one-on-one advisement, most of the time I'm dealing with a superintendent or a chief of a school district, right? They're calling Anashay saying, hey, we've got this thing going on. Can you look at our system and help us redesign a solution? Ultimately, that's what consultants do, right? What pays the bills is I'm a K-12 consultant. So I have to go in and I have to shut my mouth and listen to all the different parts and pieces, right? And then triangulate that, right? You got a matrix and a web of different perspectives and things. And I'm always going to go back to power and positionality because to whom much is given, much is required. And if you tell me you're not sure about something, then I'm going to hold you accountable, leader or person in power, because power is not always leader. But power could be the person with the money, the person that can make the decision about, hey, as a district, we're going to set aside 15 minutes across the district to do XYZ. I'm going straight to the power source. I mean, if your toaster burnt or blowing up, who's responsible? You better go to the power source, right? You know what I mean? So you better go to the power. Kanye say that no one person should have all that power, right? So you have
Right.
to educate, and the most powerful people in the K-12 system is actually the parent, because the parent is
Yeah.
actually in charge of the kid, right? So this is why people don't like the digital wallets and all the different solutions in education, because as the child goes and the parent is pulling that string, so does your money. Per pupil spending. Say it with me. Per pupil spending. You want that dollar, right? At the end of the day, you follow the money, you're going to follow the power and the problem and the promise.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for, it's interesting. I'm glad you are going here because it's taking me to the next element of what I want to talk to you about is that, they say that I think the one important principle of disruption is that if you continue to do the same thing, you're going to get the same outcomes. And if you're expecting different outcomes from the same thing, that terminology is insanity.
That's
And
it.
so the biggest disruptor that I believe is occurring right now in front of our eyes that we're not paying attention to it for several different reasons, and some of it is intentional, some of it may not, is the influence of AI on parenting and education. I think we are behind the eight ball in thinking about the power that AI has to transform our communities or harness and oppress our communities without our input and engagement in that space because we've been told to resist it. And we're resisting it because we don't understand it. When you think about innovation and when you think about innovation being a disruptor in our education spaces, what should parents know about wrapping their heads around doing something different as it relates to educating their children?
So, this is so interesting. I was featured in The Economist last summer. Yeah, this is so funny. Yeah, for just this topic, right? AI education, right? And the headline was non-white American parents are embracing AI faster than white ones. The
Mm,
digital divide seems to have flipped, because the story that we're telling ourselves, right, is that we're behind. But the story that I think, and in some ways we are, but when it comes to adopting it,
mhm,
the information and knowledge is out there, we can surpass. This is what I had to tell the reporter. I'd always look for ways, like grant writing, right? I used to always wonder why. Like, if you are an affluent white organization and you know how to write grants, why aren't you coming to our communities educating us on how to write successful grants?
mm,
Right? To me, it was so simple. I don't want you to write the grant for me. I want you to give me a grant template that I can copy and paste and do multiple grants without you being there, because
mhm,
that's where sufficiency comes in. And it, when I asked people in power to do that, they were like, oh, yeah, no problem. And that's when I got my first six-figure grant.
mm.
Okay, like it's the sum of us, right? And so this is why I'm unapologetically black and love everything about being who I am. I also love my white co-conspirators, my co-conspirators who do not look like me,
Mhm.
right? Because it's the sum of us. It's the collective dopeness, brilliance, and diversity that actually makes us win.
Right.
Right. And so what the article was saying is that no, if you teach us how to fish, teach us how to use AI as a family, we actually are tired of asking people to help us. We are tired of this inconsistent wanting to write a grant for the church, wanting to do something for our organization. So I learned when AI came out, I was blessed in that I wasn't in a 9 to 5 job. I had started using AI in 2019 as assistive devices with kids in Black alternative high school and middle schools, right? And I used it because people would say, oh, that kid can't write or that kid can't do something. I said, no. I said, are we measuring his ability to write with a pen or are we measuring his thinking? So I tell the kid to speak their paper. Don't write a paper, speak your paper. And let Microsoft Word capture your genius. Because with an ADD kid, right, their brain is moving faster than they can write. So I'm like, well, let's capture the brilliance.
Right.
The kids didn't know that they had all of that in them.
Right.
Okay. So in our communities, right, we're actually adopting it faster because we're tired. We're tired of being woke and broke, right? We're tired of having a book birth in us, right? But not knowing how to get it from head, right? Get it from heart, head to ideation. And so actually Black families, Black and brown families are adopting it quicker once they get their hands on it. And there's less having to disrupt their mindset about it than some of the more affluent people.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now the issue is who's getting access to the tools quicker, right? The knowledge of it quicker. That's the problem is the formal education system. And shameless plug, I'm partnering with Innovate EDU right now to design an AI accelerator program for educators.
Okay.
Right. So the question is, okay, I would love to bring this to my community, but who's gonna pay for it? Because I can't do it for free. Right. So that's where we are like having to come together to figure out where these dollars at to put these AI. I can build an AI accelerator. I can facilitate it. I can do all of that. But we have to get the funding in our communities for these accelerators, which are like 3 to 4 week booster shots of knowledge, where you meet every week, once a week, and you play with the tool and then you create a product.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that because I think where as you say that, I'm thinking this. And I think sometimes we can get caught up in having the greatest numbers of consumers, but not having an adequate number of creators.
That's it.
Right? Because if we had creators,
That's it.
you wouldn't have to go and ask somebody else to help you create. That's where I believe we're falling behind, not into your point to your consumption, because I read an article. I think I started somewhere around the same time you did. It may have been 2020 when I really started. I've been in computers my entire life, but more specifically AI, probably about 2020. And I remember reading a article from the Harvard Business Review that was talking about if people of color did not use like Midjourney in the way that everybody else was using it, because using the systems actually teaches the system, right? That's what AI is.
Yes.
The
Yes.
more you use it, the more you teach it.
Yep.
And so if people was using descriptors of Black people who were non-Black, when you type in create a picture of a Black man going to the store, it was more likely, and it used to drive me crazy because I couldn't stop it from doing this. Every time it would create a Black man for me, it would put an earring in his ear. And I would say everything. Do not put an earring in his ear, blah, 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 plain ear, no ear, blah, 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 blah. And in my mind was like, why is this thing continuing to put a freaking earring in this man's ear?
Right.
It's because that's what has been taught as a descriptor of Black men. And what was disturbing me the most when there was a big uptake in people using Midjourney and other programs like that, that we were creating caricatures of Black people and not real Black people. And so when you go in to look for something that was more in line with what you were trying to do, it was very difficult to do because the system didn't understand that. It's not the case now. It's leveling out now. Um, but my mind was in who's at the table, right? It's almost the DEI conversation when a company does something that's crazy because they thought it was a good idea until they get the backlash of like, did you really think that that ad was going to like pass to like the mustard in the black communities? Like, why would you put a watermelon on the table? It's like, oh, we didn't think anything of it. You know why you didn't think anything of it? Because a person wasn't at the table that could say to you, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
So in creating, how do we ensure that not only are we engaged in the consuming of this stuff, but the actual creation, which is then the educational piece, right? Which is in our elementary schools, how are we beginning to teach our children about the importance of AI and how they can play roles in creating AI systems, not just consuming and using them?
You just remove the word, how can we teach our children? And you replace it with, we can teach their parents, right?
Okay.
It's a simple thing. Teach the parents to play with AI. Don't try to shove it down their throat.
Mm.
Don't try to mandate it. And with AI, there are no tables, right? So we talk about invitation. Like I always talk about this. Right? I actually don't want an invitation to whack broken tables, right? Like it's like always been awkward to me. I'm like, no, just teach me. I just want to build my own.
Right.
Right? I have, and scarcity is not real, right? But we have such this scarcity mindset sometimes in our own communities, let alone society, right? Where scarcity, there's room and there's enough for everybody.
Right.
You center the user in AI first. You simply have them think of one problem that they have more specifically in their day-to-day work, right? You want to think about it, not this grandiose poverty and all that stuff. That's too big when it comes to AI.
Mhm.
You want to think about your professional and personal life. Like personal, when I go on a trip, I struggle to plan what I'm gonna do with my family.
Mhm.
When I go to work, I struggle to create a tracker, right? That's where you start. For me, as a Black parent, it changed my life,
Okay.
right? Because I worked in white centric spaces that worship the written word. Our
Mhm.
society worships the written word. If it's not in a doc, a deck, right, a tracker, it ain't real. A
Mhm.
one pager. And so, as a person that was diagnosed with ADD as an adult and that worked with ADD kids and SPED certified, um, I felt like there was always this tornado in my brain, but it could never capture my genius because there would be so many competing thoughts until I spoke my brilliance.
Okay.
So, as a Black mama, when I spoke my brilliance, I then in turn taught my son and then the kids that I was teaching to speak their brilliance.
Mhm.
It translated their words into memos, slide decks in a
Mhm.
world that worships the written word. Look at our Bible, it's the written word,
Right.
right? And when I say my soul leaped with joy, because for all these years we talked about what kids couldn't do, but imagine a world where we now focus on everything that a kid can do.
Mm.
And it starts with the adults, right? You can't skip the adult and think you're going to get to a child. And it's not just the parent, it's the adults that's most proximate to the kids.
Right.
If you're an educator, you got 8 hours with the kid, you better make sure them educators know something about it and learn how to make AI their ally, their bestie, their friend.
Yeah.
And when I learned how to use it, I took it to classrooms and then I taught my son and my daughter how to brainstorm their ideas, how to get feedback on their own schoolwork. And then I used it to help my son draft an appeal letter to a university that rejected him
Mm.
because he had a story to tell. The application didn't ask for his story. So once you get declined the offer to come to the school for admission, you can appeal. So number one, he had to know his power. You have the power to write that school and make the case. And I made him sit down in front of one of my 10 AI allies and speak his truth. And to have that thing just right. When I was 6, I had this. When I was 5, I had this. And then to slap some pictures beside it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And not only did he get accepted, he also got a partial scholarship for music. And I
Wow.
taught him how to find the president. We sent it to the president, the admissions office, and the band director. And I made him click send from his account.
Mm.
So that's the power. AI can help a kid make their case where normally they would not be accepted to a university. It helps us tell our stories, the untapped hidden brilliance that's always been in our communities. But now it's game on. You want a doc or a deck? We all giving you a doc or a
Right.
deck. You don't beat the system by being outside all the time trying to buck the system. You beat the system by learning it and making it work for you and your
Right.
community.
Yeah, and that's I love that you said that because that's part of the work, right? And so the question is, where does that work in terms of informing our parents? Because I love what you said. I used to say that about when I used to go to meetings in the education space about um, child mobility. Yeah, I think it was child
Mhm.
mobility. And I used to say, children don't go from school to school to school because they want to go from school to school to school. They go from school to school to school because their parents are hopping from place to place to place to place. You got to settle and stabilize the parent in order to stabilize the student. So
Yeah.
while we putting so much emphasis in worrying about how many times a kid is going from school to school and not paying attention and providing services that stabilize the family. I think that we are in many cases not using, even in the last election. One of the biggest things that disturbed me on both sides of the coin
Mhm.
about the last election, and even the one before that, like we are not putting a big enough emphasis on family stability. Like we're not talking enough about holistic services for families. How do we stabilize families? Whether it's economic, whether it's societal, whether it's mental, whether it's physical, whether it's whatever the case may be, the stabilization for me of a community is when a family is stable, right? And so, which is why I'm in the work that I'm in
Yeah.
around fathers, right? Because I personally believe, and no one else has to believe this, I believe it. God put the calling on me, so I'm gonna work it
That's right.
till it works, right? Or not work. But
Yeah.
I'm sure that I'm not in a work that he doesn't believe is gonna have an impact on something. And I believe that when you build and you strengthen men in communities, that families strengthen. When families strengthen, communities strengthen. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they can't strengthen without, right? That, but they're going to struggle. Like I always tell people, listen, when I was growing up in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, there were times when we had some cornflakes in the cabinet, but we didn't have no milk in the refrigerator. And my mother would say, "You better put some water on it. You better not throw that cereal away." And I used to always say, "Okay, we're gonna do this, but we gotta also be clear that while it is edible, it wasn't meant to be eaten that way,
Right. Right. Right.
right?"
Right.
While families can do well and you can still have a family without a father, it was not meant to
Yeah.
be that way.
No, it was not.
Right? The full strength and nourishment of what you're gonna get out of that meal is to make sure that all the ingredients are what should
Yeah.
be in that thing that you are trying to bake. And in the case of family, mothers, men, women, children, men, women, children. Now, the construct of what that looks like can be different across families, but for community, we don't live in a world where there is one and not the other. We have to interact no matter where we go in terms of being men
Mhm.
and women.
Mhm.
All
Mhm.
the other stuff, not dismissive. It's a part of it,
Yeah.
but there is no way that you nor I would be sitting on this screen right now if it wasn't because of a man and a woman. It's
Yeah.
the only reason that we're here, which means that our makeup is such, which means that the ingredients that we need to continue the perpetuation of the species needs both of those things. That is what we need to bring back into context, which also says at the same time that while you and I can disagree, we can agree to disagree
Yeah.
and we can talk about points while at the same time having the same goal,
Yeah.
right? We can disagree on a point. I don't necessarily believe you in that. And you can say, well, I don't necessarily understand. Oh, yeah, I ain't trying to feel you on that. That's fine. We could disagree on that. But the goal got to be the goal. And
Yeah.
if the goal for you and I is children, we got to get our life right because selfishness has no place in raising kids. Because once you have children, your life is not your own anymore. And so
Yeah.
when I'm gonna step away from that and just because I know I see the smoke coming out of your head.
I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think at the same time, though, my family didn't look like the traditional family dynamic. But to your point, from just to step out of the procreation and biological sense, right? Like that's just is what it is, right? You got to have,
Right.
like, you can't get around that one. So that's
Right.
why I was laughing. I was like, you know what? Good point. That's why we
Right.
all here. I
Right.
think though, even when biological fathers aren't there, what we've lost is a sense of community.
Yes.
And so it was, I'm my brother's keeper or my sister's keeper. It was never enough for my kids to just be well.
Right.
Right. And my mama, it was never enough. My mom was a writer, a poet. Like, and she had a high school diploma. But when my mom was upset, she wrote John Lewis. My mama taught me to weaponize literacy. So that was number one. Right.
Mm.
My mama taught me there was so much power in the pen because we live in a Eurocentric society that worships written words. So that was number one. Number two is monetize. If you
Mm.
made sure every parent kid knew how to either write a course using AI, a book, I bet you would have a fraction of the problems that you
Right.
teach a parent how to write a strategic plan with AI.
Right.
Teach a parent how to write an onboarding plan for their church or do a church program, right? My son, he started monetizing his genius at a very early age. 9 years old, he did his first speech in front of 300 people for the organization I worked for. And it just started with one question. They were like, well, what are the experiences of Black boys in school? And I was like, well, I won't never let you colonize the truth of a Black boy when I got one in my house. Ask him.
Right.
Don't ask me. Don't ask a bunch of adults how Black children, because you want some research. I'm not the one or the two for that foolishness.
Right.
I got some Black boys, one in my house. Ask them.
Mm-hmm.
So my son was in the 4th grade and he was featured in that interview. Well, from there, people wanted to hear his perspectives. And I would say, skirt, not for free.
Right.
We've given you one free article.
Right.
And the same way you pay a doctor or a lawyer for their genius and their lived experience, right? The lived experience of law school, the lived experience of the bar. You ain't finna go take the bar. So you pay them for their brilliance. You're going to pay my Black son for his lived experience of being Black.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was getting like 75 an hour, right?
Right.
So again, teaching kids that their stories are worth it. Put it in a book, right? Teaching parents that, right? Teaching our communities that a 9-to-5 job is not it. Everybody needs a skill where they can monetize.
Right.
And so you teach the families that you ain't gonna have no attendance problems. Our communities don't need saviors. They need servant leaders.
Right.
We're not broken. We're not. You could show me from the hood to the boardroom. I would say you show me a problem child, I'll show you a genius. Show me an argumentative child, I'll show you an attorney.
Right.
Because attorneys get paid to argue.
Absolutely.
Right. So again, this crazy impoverished mindset, these poor little are you kidding me? When I can't even fathom that when I see a Black man, a Black woman, or a Black child. I think my daughter, when she was 6, she started at African centered schools when she was 4. And African centered schools don't teach anti anything. They teach pro Black.
Right.
And it just means, are you for Black people? Anybody can be for anybody, right? So she didn't know about the story of the enslavement of humans until she got to traditional school. Like, they don't teach about death. They teach about Kwame Nkrumah, right? They teach about Ida B. Wells. They teach about the power. So when she was 6, she just was like, Mom, I'm having a tough time. We were at the dinner table. And I said, okay, well, what's going on? She said, I feel so bad for white people. And I was like, Lord, either I need coffee or wine. I don't know which one. And I said, okay, tell me about it. Why do you feel bad for white people? And her response was one sentence. She said, Mama, because they can't be Black. And she was hurt. She had just watched the movie Harriet. And she was always wanting, I want to pray to the ancestors like Harriet. Like, she was been a deep child from the beginning, right? Because all she knows is how amazing we are. And she feels bad for white people.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I'm sure they're good, but I get where you going with this, right? But it just changed. It disrupted me in a way where if we lead with the promise of everybody, right? And she had a point. Like you got everybody asking to teach us how teach me how to Dougie. Ain't nobody saying teach me how to river dance. You know what I'm
Mm,
saying? Like there's such a loss in identity,
right.
right? When people don't, and that's when I started to say my heart goes out to the white community. My heart goes out to them, right? Because you've cultivated in a society that is taken so much that you don't know who the hell you are.
Right.
Right. Whereas my kids are raised to know things aren't fair, right? Like when my child, when I made a 50, I remember being in 10th grade and I made a 50 on the test. My mom was like, oh, you halfway there. So let's work on the other half, right? Like,
Mm,
but I'm working in white centric spaces. Education is 85% white women. And they're like, oh my God, Timmy didn't make an A. I'm like, well, even when Timmy make an A, they still can't read.
right.
Boop. And I've seen it firsthand. Can't read if their life depend on it, but they making A's, right? Because they know how to test take.
Right. Yeah.
So again, it's the question I keep going back to is what's the story you're telling yourself about me and my community? Because you need to check your story because that's not the self story I'm telling mine.
Right. Where does hope fall in this place? Because, walking into these schools, sometimes for me, I'm an eye person. I'm gonna look you in the eye person. I'm trying to see what's in your eyes.
Yeah.
Like, is there curiosity? Is there hope? Is there anger? Is there love? So, what's in your eyes? And I wonder sometimes how often I don't see hope, right? Because hope, I believe, is the stimulator of resilience. Like you become resilient because you're hopeful of something. Like a situation can be better. I can make it out of this current situation. There's something out there for me. I don't know what it is. That's what a hopeful child has, even when you don't see it and you can see it in their eyes sometimes.
Yeah.
Like when you're looking at our children today, can you still see hope?
Oh man, the hopeless people are the adults, not the kids.
Okay.
The kids don't. Like, I mean, I've taught over
That's
2,100.
a good point. Say that again. Say
Yeah, it
that.
ain't the kid. Like the kids be looking at the adults like, bruh, like we're not we're like this is where the disruption comes in. Gen Z and Gen Alpha are our two youngest generations,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
They're more hopeful than what we've ever seen because of rapid fire access to information,
Hmm.
right? On the internet. The hope killers are the adults. It's like the adults are the ones that want. I want to make sure you know about what was the one, the Black Wall Street murder massacre. Well, yeah, you need to know about that. But I'm like, did you know actually what was the per capita spending before they died? Like everything doesn't end in death, right? And it
Hmm.
doesn't have to. But we perpetuate our own hopelessness. It's just weird. Like I walk into a school, right? And its kids are everywhere. Alternative school. I'm like, what's up, future leader? What's up, future doctor? What's up, future mayor? I'm instantly giving booster shots of hope. Booster shots because all I can see when I see you, even you on this, is joy, peace, and power.
Mm.
I see safety. I see father figure. I can't even, my brain doesn't even work in a negative light when it comes to our children and the next generation, agnostic of race.
Mm.
Start off with a kid, look a kid in the eye and say, what's up, CEO?
Mm.
What's up, future? You if they live in a world that's constantly telling them what they ain't, then imagine the power we have to simply tell them what they could be and what they are.
Mm.
I believe every child should be the CEO of their life because whether you lead other people, you have to lead yourself. You got to lead yourself to the toothbrush. You got to lead yourself to the school bus. You got to lead. No, unless somebody gonna pick your leg up and walk you to.
Right.
Anybody willing you, you have to lead. So it's the things and the decisions you make in those split moments. So if I double down on before you got a chance to think something bad about yourself, I'm gonna tell you three things that's good. What's up, future leader? The hopelessness, I can't see it. I honestly have trained my brain in a way where what hurts the worst is that adults lead with what's broken and what's wrong with kids instead of just opening your mouth saying one thing that's right.
Mm.
What do you appreciate about these kids? Because if you can't have one appreciation before you let a deficit come out your mouth, the adult is the problem, not the kid.
Wow.
We have more power than them
And we have more wisdom.
and more wisdom. But they have wisdom too, though, right? It's
Right.
like if they say what they want to say, they're written up. You
Mm-hmm.
say what you want to say, you got a space to make the case. They
Right.
don't get that. So they feel imprisoned in every aspect of their lives. That's why they're shooting up schools, because they're not heard.
Right.
Adults can't sit down, listen to a kid without giving your opinion. You're not their savior. They're not broken. They're
Right.
not. So that's the thing. It's the same thing in the work that you do. The story we're telling ourselves about Black men, I rebuke that to the pits of hell.
Right.
Because I know so many amazing Black men. My uncle, shout out to my Uncle Gary. I got so many great uncles that they may have been locked up, but they still was brilliant. And if
Mm-hmm.
you was in trouble, you was gonna get your $5. My grandma taught me you get your $5 Christmas card. And your $5. Now you're gonna do your time,
Right.
but I'ma still love on you. And remember every great thing. We're gonna focus on the promise of you, not the problem. Because you in jail, you already know your problem.
Right.
I don't need to
Yeah.
repeat that. So if we can stop today, everybody make a commitment. Before you let something judgmental or deficit come out your mouth, can you say one thing good about the person you're looking at? Go to Taco Bell and say the person's name tag. Hey, Kieran. What's up, young king? What's
Mm-hmm.
up, future CEO? What's up, Black Bill Gates? Know their culture well enough to be able to speak life in a way that resonates with them, because it's not about us, it's about the next generation. And I've never written a kid up in my life because I never had to. Over 2,000 children. Didn't have to. Mm-mm.
Dr. Anashay, you are brilliant. You are phenomenal. Goodness.
And you are family. You got me on here January 3rd. What the day? I was burning myself trying to curl my hair. But no, I am so grateful. Yeah, for me, I really wish that we can create these these learning accelerators. I wish every community was set up with just a learning hub. So whatever
Mm-hmm.
new information comes in, we always have experts in our communities to come out as facilitators. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
let's talk more about that offline. 'Cause I have some thoughts when you said that. I'm like, let me think about that. But it's that's kind of when I was leaning back into the creators, like the natural
yes.
creators, like my nephew. I have a 16-year-old. A nephew lives with us. He's been with us for the whole pandemic because his mother was a first responder. And when
Oh,
you talk about brilliance, I'm looking at this kid, but he's juxtaposed to my son, who's 16, and KJ has the world at his fingertips. KJ can be is gonna his brilliant. It's you have that kid, like nothing. He was like me. Nothing was a challenge to me. Motivation was my only challenge. It
okay.
wasn't ability. It was motivation to do it. Right. And so I didn't have to study to make an A. If
Mm-hmm.
I was reading something, it was because I wanted to read it, not because I needed to read it to make an A. I was going to get an A, regardless, right? Because I was paying attention in school,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Andrew's a different kid, like you know,
What's up, nephew? Look.
right? But where I don't see that achievement in the academic space, I see the creative genius in his mind. This is a kid. Anashay, he came to me. We were talking about social media, and I was telling him one day, I was like, "Man, I'm the king. I'm like, I know social media, I know algorithms, I know this, I know." I was going on and on and on and on about social media, telling them what they should be doing and how they should be using their Instagram page and blah 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 blah. So my wife came to me and she goes, "You ever seen Andrew's Instagram page?" I was like, "Andrew got an Instagram page?" And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, I was like, "First of all, how he get an Instagram page? Because he ain't asked me for no. Yeah, I had to go there first,
Right,
right?"
right,
She goes, "I don't know." She goes, "KJ had one because KJ plays basketball." And I said, "Well, yeah,
right.
but KJ's, we're building his, for his as
Uh-huh.
his
For his
resume for college."
portfolio, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And she goes, "Here, look at it." She goes, "Here it is right now. Here it is right here." She shows it to me. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, wait a minute, 32,000. But I'm like, he got 32,000. Like, I only got like 1,200. Like, how you get 32,000? Like, what
Oh,
is he doing? And he says, and then she was like, look at these things. He says they do this stuff with this anime and they create these. cut things and they create them, and these kids like they create different narratives with these
Yep.
things,
Yep.
messages, and they said, and that's what he does, and he has. And I'm like, I went to him, I was like, yo, I was like, you didn't tell me you had like an Instagram page with. I said, do you know that you can monetize this and actually make some serious dollars in like doing this? Now, if I was just judging him by what I just described to him, his academic outcomes, and not his creative genius, which is where his brilliance is, I would miss his whole boat.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
miss his whole boat. And so I love what you said, and I wonder how we capture that essence in at least our cultural educational space, not the institutional education space.
That's what I was going to say, man, because you got input, you got the process, and then the output. Schools only measure output. They don't
Right.
measure the input and the process and the genius. One of the highest forms of intelligence is being able to write lyrics, perform lyrics, right, and do it off of rote memorization.
Right.
Using similes, metaphors, all literary devices. So
Right.
his level of intelligence is far beyond a traditional school, quite honestly.
Right.
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 It's really far beyond. And so I think to that point, you simply just have to educate people on here are 3 ways you can monetize this, right? Number one, there's
Mhm.
like this 18-year-old thing, like you gotta be a certain age to monetize. I think because I've went viral. Like my story with my son was so similar. We were in the pandemic and I was like on TikTok trying to get 1,000 followers. I was like, man, if I can get 1,000 followers, I was like, do you know anybody that's gotten 5,000 followers that I can pay or do? And he was like, let me see. Then 3 seconds later, I get a screenshot. He's got like 13,000 followers on TikTok. So I'm getting competitive. So then I get my little fake 13,000 followers on Facebook. I'm like, now take this, right? And then I
Uh-huh.
got my first, I mean, like $1,200 from going viral.
Right.
But to your point, once you set up one kid like your nephew up, your first 3 module course, you have him speak his steps into an AI tool, it
Mhm.
spits it out, slap it on a PowerPoint, and record him. Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy Andrew. Let me tell you 3 ways you can do XYZ.
Right.
That's what people want to know the next step,
Right.
right?
Right.
Education, we be just philosophizing and everything. And I'm like, what's step 1 again? What's
Right.
step 1? Right. So creatives are like that because we want to create. So, I would say with him, again, it's generally going to be in the format of a book, a course, right, or content on social media. And that's how you can't, it's only 3 things you can really make: a book, a course. People make it
Right.
difficult,
Right.
right? So either have him write a how-to book using AI, keep the book under 20 pages or less, make it a fun picture book and challenge
Mhm.
him to do that.
Mhm.
A course is the second level, right?
Mhm.
And then you sell and market it with your content.
Right.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you so much. I'm glad you spent your January 3rd with me. This was incredible. My audience gonna love it. You and I gotta talk about how we
Oh
gotta
no, I
and I
already
always,
know.
and I
I'm
always tell people we're gonna pinky in the brain up. We're gonna pinky in the brain up. We're gonna figure out how we're gonna take over the world.
I
Um,
need you to mentor me to get my book from my Google Drive to the publishing. I need a mentor. So
let's
that's
let's
what,
let's holler. I got
because
you.
once I do that, then I can
Right,
train kids and other people
right.
how to do it. So
I got
you got a skill set that we all looking at you like,
yeah,
Dr. Ken, we
yeah,
need you, good
yeah.
Reverend Doctor, to
Yeah.
teach us that way.
Time is my wife is on me all the time. I was like, I just don't have time. I'm trying to save the world. She's like, yeah, but you gotta, and I'm like, and I have my little pockets where I do this and I do that. And I was like, I said, I hear you. I just gotta figure it out because I get it all the time. It's I need you. Can you help?
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is, so, you know, and I'm trying to figure out where this fits. And when you were talking about this earlier about grants and contracts, because I have federal contracts, federal, state, all contracts. Since 2015, 2015, 2010, 2011. Since 2011, I have managed $93 million in federal contracts. And people keep saying, and you don't like, how do you not talk about that? And my response is, because it's not part of my mission. My mission is not to talk about how I do what I do. It is what I do. That just happens to be how I've done what I've done. And people would kill to know how you have been able to garner that much money. And now, this personal contract is grant work, is not my whole thing is. So here's my goal for January 31st, 2026. I said this to my wife probably about 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And she said, I said, my goal for December 31st, 2026 is I want to be able to utter the words, when I made my first million. And she looked at me, and I was like, and I said, why are you looking at me that way? And she says, you already made your first million. And I said, no, I didn't. I made my first million for my work. I didn't make my first million for my family.
Yeah.
That's different, right? Because what I need to transfer from a legacy perspective is my personal wealth. That's what's going to take care of my children's children's children.
Mhm.
And so, but what I have not done over the last 15 years of this work is, how do I leverage the fact that I've been able to garner that much in federal contract money to do work on behalf of the federal money, and have not translated that into personal wealth. That's my own loss. And you know why I lost that? Because I did not have a mentor with me to help me understand how to harness my professional wealth into my personal wealth.
So once you start recording, I want to respond to that. Once we,
Okay.
yeah,
So let me end this, and because I just wanted to share that with
that's a
you.
big. I think you said something that is so profound, because you have people like me who actually don't want to know about the contract side, right? I actually want to partner with. My gift is educating instructional design program models.
Right.
Right. So I think there's also this element, we're not working smarter in our communities. Everybody doesn't need the same skill
Right.
either.
Right.
Right. If there's people that want that skill, then we need to be setting you up with a program where we charge $9.97 a person. They come sit on 10 people at a time,
Right.
and you walk them through the process, record it, and turn it into a course.
Absolutely.
That's my gift, right? But I don't want to know how you got the money. I want to know that the budget, what's my budget, and let me take it to the finish line. So I think we're not, even myself phasing out businesses and getting ready to return to 9 to 5, like doing something I probably don't love, right? But because monetization, like that grant and federal stuff, that's not my thing, nor do I have a desire to be the sole person doing it in my business or my nonprofit or my for-profit.
Right.
So it's like, I'm burnt out. I know what my skills are, but I know what they aren't. And so I think we're not working strategically, and I'm a strategist at my core, but we're just not working strategically as a people, and we're working harder than we should be to grow generational wealth.
Absolutely. And on that note, I want to thank you again. Happy New Year, and thank you. This won't be the last time we chop it up on these conversations, because I love having these conversations with brilliant people and innovative thinkers. And so, and also to my I Am Dad podcast listeners, you know how I like to leave you: always be kind to others as you're kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend and mentor Art Mitchell always said to me, Kenny, it's nice to be important, but you know what? It's much more important to be nice. Until next Sunday, God bless and peace out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.